Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1070 for August 18th, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
That was our goal. We just wanted to really bring bourbon production into a craft environment here in Washington State, while always honoring the traditions and the lineage that had come before us.
It's a big weekend at Washington State's Woodinville Whiskey distillery. Their oldest expression yet went on sale Saturday, with people lining up on Friday morning to get first crack at the 8-year-old bourbon. Orlin Sorenson is the co-founder of Woodinville Whiskey, and he'll join me later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Gabriel Cardarella from Jewers here. The 2024 U.S. Open Championship may have ended, but you can still get your hands on the whiskey created to honor it. The new Jewers 19-Year-Old Champions Edition. Trust me, a whiskey you don't want to miss. More details coming up.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Small batch. How would you describe it? It's like an Irishman's understanding of baseball. Extremely limited.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. First off, let's update a story we brought you last week on a proposed alcohol tax hike in Nebraska, where state lawmakers killed the proposal on arrival this week. Governor Jim Pillen wanted to raise the excise tax on alcoholic beverages by 287% as part of a property tax relief plan. Under that plan, excise taxes on alcohol would have gone from $3.75 per gallon to $14.50 per gallon. Another update on a story we brought you several weeks ago. The U.S. Justice Department has appealed a Texas federal court judge's ruling that declared a law banning home distilling unconstitutional. Last month, District Court Judge Mark Pittman ruled that the federal government cannot enforce the ban against the 1,300 members of the Hobby Distillers Association. The Texas-based group has been trying to legalize home distilling for years. Its members will still need permits to distill, but the judge ruled that permits cannot be denied just because the distillery is home-based. More importantly, he ruled that those who do distill at home cannot be prosecuted. Washington State's dry fly distilling in Spokane has been sold to the Wagner family, which owns Caymus Vineyards in the Napa Valley and other wineries. The two have collaborated on projects in the past, including a wheat whiskey matured in Caymus wine barrels that is set for release next year. Dry Fly founder Don Poffenroth is transitioning into a new role as Chief Fishing Officer. He'll be succeeded as president by Patrick Donovan, who was the distillery's first employee. Maine's Wiggly Bridge Distillery wants to expand, but neighbors are objecting loudly. They have submitted a petition to put a proposed ordinance on the ballot in York, Maine, that would limit distilleries in the town because of concerns over whiskey fungus. The proposed ordinance would require distilleries to be 400 feet away from homes and be on a lot of at least 25 acres. A hearing before the York Select Board is set for August 26th. In other news, retired Glen Grant master distiller Dennis Malcolm has one final surprise for us, the release of the new Glasshouse collection. It includes the Glen Grant 21-year-old that came out a year or two ago, but there's a new 25-year-old expression that's available now, as well as a 30-year-old coming early next year. They're the oldest official distillery releases of Glen Grant yet. The 25-year-old will be priced at around $1,000 a bottle, while the 30-year-old will be priced at $3,000 each. Glenmorangie's Dr. Bill Lumsden is a wine geek as well as a whiskey maker, and the latest release from Glenmorangie speaks to that love. It's a 3-bottle Pursuit of Passion wine cask collection with a 29-year-old Margaux wine cask finish, a 28-year-old Corton Charlemagne white Burgundy cask finish, and a 27-year-old Barbaresco cask finish. The 3-bottle collection will retail for £7,700 a set, with 600 sets available worldwide. Meanwhile, Ardbeg is about to release the 6th edition of its Trayvon 19-year-old single malt. As with previous releases, it's matured in a combination of ex-bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks. It'll go on sale in the U.S. September 1st as well as globally. The Lakes Distillery in England is breaking into the travel retail market with its first duty-free release. Boundless has matured in first fill Oloroso sherry casks and will go on sale September 29th at select travel retail outlets around Europe, along with Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. There's no word on pricing. Old Forester has unveiled this year's birthday bourbon. It's a 12-year-old bourbon from a single day's production and will only be available through a nationwide sweepstakes running through August 21st for $199.99 a bottle. We've posted a link for the drawing in the show notes for this episode at WhiskyCast.com. Michter's is about to release the 2024 edition of its US1 Toasted Barrel Finish bourbon. It's the 10th anniversary of the first Toasted Barrel Finish release and takes fully matured US1 small batch bourbon and gives it an extra maturation period in toasted barrels. It'll go on sale in September for around $100 a bottle in the U.S. Chicago's Fuse Spirits is out with Fuse Chicago Smokeworks Whiskey. It's a malt whiskey made with cherrywood smoked malted barley and rye grains. Look for it at a recommended retail price of around $50 a bottle. Lux Row Distillers has released the third edition of its Blood Oath Trilogy, a 3-bottle set of Blood Oath bourbons from the last 3 years, with packs 7, 8, and 9. Only 1,400 sets are available at a recommended retail price of $799.99 a set. And sister distillery Ross & Squibb, also known as MGP, is about to release the 8th edition of Remus Repeal Reserve Series bourbon. It features a blend of 3 bourbons ranging from 10 to 17 years old and will be available starting next month for $99.99 a bottle. Kansas City's J. Rieger & Company has released what it's calling an affordable luxury bourbon. Rieger Straight Bourbon Whiskey uses the same mash bill as Rieger's Bottled in Bond and is made using sweet mash fermentation. It's 4 years old and will sell for $30 to $35 a bottle. Texas's Milam and Green Distillery will be releasing the latest whiskey in its wildlife collection this Wednesday. Roadrunner Single Barrel Bourbon is an 8-year-old whiskey that gets its name from the roadrunners that scoot around the distillery in Blanco, Texas. It'll go on sale exclusively at the distillery shop and the Milam and Green website on Wednesday afternoon. Proceeds from the wildlife collection benefit Texas Parks and Wildlife. And finally, the Premier League is starting back up again, and Arsenal's uniforms will have a new sponsor. Chivas Regal is becoming Arsenal's official whiskey partner for both the men's and women's teams, and there will be a new Chivas Regal bar at Emirates Stadium. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Whiskeys of the World is this Friday night in Boston. The American Whiskey Show takes place on Saturday in Sydney, Australia, along with the Chicago and Denver Summer Whiskey Festivals. Whiskey and Barrel Night at the Games is August 31st and September 1st in Pleasanton, California. The Fraser History Museum in Louisville hosts a Michter's Speakeasy Night on September 5th. That same night is the Whiskey X in Nashville, Tennessee. The weekend of September 6th, 7th, and 8th brings us the Spirit of Speyside Distilled in Elgin, Scotland, Maltstock in Nijmegen, the Netherlands, and I'll be at the Whiskey Show in London that weekend. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
A thoughtful gift is hard work. What you need is a go-to multi-purpose gift for all occasions. A bottle of Redbreast can say, "Enjoy every minute, they grow up so fast." Oh. And equally nails, "Apologies for the back pain, I should have just hired a moving company."
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Bourbon and the Classic Malts lineup. Washington State's Woodinville Whiskey is celebrating its 15th anniversary this year, and people started lining up on Friday morning to get the first chance to buy the distillery's oldest release yet, an 8-year-old bourbon that went on sale Saturday morning. Orlin Sorenson and Brett Carlisle founded the distillery in the early days of the craft distilling boom and eventually sold it to the Glenmorangie Company while staying on to run day-to-day operations. I talked with Orlin Sorenson on a Zoom call this week. Let's start off with the Woodinville Whiskey origin story for those listeners who aren't familiar with you guys. Tell me how you started the distillery all those years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been 15 years that we've been at this in the early days of craft distilling. My business partner and I, Brett Carlisle, we grew up here locally in the Woodinville area. If you're not familiar with Woodinville, it's home to over 100 wineries in a 5-mile radius of where we sit at the moment, and some of the pioneering wineries such as St. Michel Wine Estates, a large winery here on the West Coast, and craft breweries as well. So we had seen what this craft industry had done in different areas of alcohol production, but really had no aspirations to go down that path. Brett and I actually went to college together, studied entirely separate subjects, and as we started our young careers, we would always come together on Friday night and enjoy a glass of bourbon together and always talk about, our dreams of being able to work together, doing something that we loved. I'm sure, like many people, have had those talks with their best friends or their friends, instead of, careers that maybe weren't all that inspiring at the time. And that's when we started to read about the laws changing in craft distillation, state by state. If you remember, it just changed in one state, changed in the other, and everybody kind of followed suit. And the craft distilling storm began. And we were up and running, as you guys know, as well. Early days, when Dave Pickerel just retired from Maker's Mark, before he got involved in many other projects, we were fortunate enough to have him come out and be our mentor and consultant and really guide Brett and I from day one before he was doing anything else on making great whiskey. That was our goal. We just wanted to really bring bourbon production into a craft environment here in Washington State, while always honoring the traditions and the lineage that had come before us. And so we began production in 2010. We never sourced here at Woodinville, so we had a very natural evolution. We did produce, some unaged spirits. White Dog at the time, thankfully, was pretty popular, as you remember. Everybody was kind of letting the White Dog out. We even did one of the first to do the age your own whiskey kits, where we'd sell White Dog with a little barrel, and you could age the whiskey at home. We did a smaller barrel we called a micro barrel line, aged in 8-gallon barrels, to kind of get us to what you taste today in our flagship 53-gallon bourbon, aged 5 to 6 years. When we released that in 2016, 17, 18, that's really when the snowball began to build for us. We won Whiskey of the Year in numerous competitions, from our industry competitions at American Distilling Institute, all the way to San Francisco International, winning Bourbon of the Year and beating out every bourbon brand in the category, followed by a rye doing kind of the same thing. And put us on the map. And, here we are today, which is amazing, releasing, while we're 15 years old, we're releasing an 8-year product. The question becomes, well, why aren't we releasing the 13, 14, 15-year-old product? For many years, we were selling every drop of whiskey that we had. We just had to kind of keep the doors open and cash flow coming in, and we weren't real thoughtful about holding much of that back, because we really did need every dollar. We didn't have deep pockets to run this business, and so we just got to a point a few years ago where we were able to really strategically start holding whiskey back, really prepping for these larger 8 statements. So we have an 8-year this year. Next year we'll have a 9 and a 10, and kind of really be able to build on it from this point forward. And it's really exciting because from a craft distillery standpoint, we're really a new territory from these kind of age statements.
You guys, as you noted, were one of the first craft distillers in Washington. What did you learn that other distillers can learn from?
A couple things, Mark, come to my mind. First and foremost was, win your backyard before you try to win the world. This is more of a business recommendation. We didn't get broad distribution for the first 7 or 8 years. We only distributed in Washington State. So while we weren't a huge brand in totality, we were a very significant, and still are to this day, brand here in Washington State. We compete with the legacy distillers from a sales standpoint in key markets. But from a brand standpoint, it was at the time we were tempted to be pulled in many directions to produce other products. It would have been nice to be able to produce a gin or a rum or all of these, like you see a lot of craft distilleries doing, and it can get a bit potpourri and confusing to the consumer. What is this brand about? We were Woodinville Whiskey from day one. We will always be Woodinville Whiskey. That was our passion. That's where we wanted to take this, and we had to be committed to that. Like, it's really easy to get sidetracked, but you never have the inventory. You never have the whiskey to grow your brand into. So you got to be committed from day one to produce that, to properly age it, to be able to live on that and be a true whiskey brand, whiskey distillery.
If you weren't doing whiskey, what would you be doing?
Oh, boy. In the spirits category or just in general?
In general.
In general. Well, I came from a completely different background. I was a commercial pilot, so I would probably still, it's my other passion. I love flying. So I would probably be in that industry in some capacity.
I think you made the right decision.
Yes, I get to be home with my family every night. It's such a fun industry to be a part of. We have an incredible team, incredible fan base, and I look forward to coming to the distillery still to this day, 15 years later, every day.
Let's talk about that 8-year-old bourbon. I had the chance to taste it the other day, and it was outstanding.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate it. That means a lot coming from you, and really, the response that we've received has been quite similar. Very exciting to be at this point with our brand and our product, and something that I think could stand up with the best of the best.
By the time this airs, you will have rolled it out on Saturday at the distillery with the first 500 bottles. Tell me about the party you're going to have.
Oh boy! Well, we have bets on when the first person will show up. The first 500 bottles are released out of the distillery. They're hand numbered. And so really a collectible item. Then we're also releasing nationally at the same time. So you'll be able to get this product in almost every single state in a limited capacity if you go track it down. But it's always a great time. We have an incredible fan base. Typically, people start camping out a night or two before, and when we open the doors on Saturday at 10 a.m. In true fashion, usually the lines down the street and around the block, hundreds of people deep. But it's really a celebration because this is the fan base that helped us get to this point. They've been with us for 15 years, and we're really excited to be able to bring it to them first.
How did you decide to go with heavily toasted, lightly charred? I get the two mixed up.
Great question. It started with a study with Independent Stave Group, working with Brad Boswell and his team. The question that we had for them in the early days was, obviously the barrel has the majority of the influence on the whiskey. What's the best bourbon barrel in the world? And, while there's opinions and best practices, it really kind of made us all look at it objectively and say, well, let's test it. And so we had 8 different barrel treatments from standard kiln dried, different char levels, all the way to 18-month season, 24-month season. And ultimately, what we found, similar to wine, that the longer the seasoning of the wood prior to raising the barrel, making the barrel, the more receptive, the more the wood broke down, and the maturation process happened a bit more dramatically, if you will. And this wasn't just an objective analysis of what it tasted like or what it smelled like. We actually had access to their fancy machinery and gas chromatographs and expensive laboratory equipment that measured the level of extracts. And we could see in this 24-month wood how much more potent it was in a good way, all the good stuff that you want. And the second thing was, what's really fun about this barrel that we chose, this light char, heavy toast. As you and all your listeners, I'm sure know, that's pretty unconventional. Everybody's using a pretty heavy char these days. But if you look back historically, lighter chars were more the norm. in generations prior to us. So, while it ultimately ended up in the bourbon world and profile, I think when you taste it, you'll see, a little bit more elegance to it and softness with that more refined char toast level, and just unique enough to really make it special.
You made the decision a few years ago to sell to LVMH and become part of the Moet Hennessy family through the Glenmorangie Company. What went into that sale? What went into the decision to do that?
Well, back to kind of the business side of whiskey, as you know, it's a challenging business model because of the maturation cycle, right? We don't need to get into the weeds there, but you start a distillery, you start producing, you have inventory coming in every day that you got to buy to produce that, and you got to wait, and you got to wait, you got to wait, you got to wait. And, we were able to do that from a true grassroots effort, just Brett and I. But you get to a point when you want to grow and you want to release 8-year products and 9-year products and 10-year products. And having a partner like Moet Hennessy, one allows you to do that. The second thing for us, though, Mark, really what it was about at the time, when you look at the brands in Moet Hennessy's portfolio, obviously, as you referenced, Glenmorangie, Ardbeg, on the nonce we got, there's Belvedere, but then there's, obviously Hennessy and Veuve Clicquot. These brands have been around for hundreds of years, and they take their brands very seriously. So the opportunity for Brett and I to have our legacies live well beyond our time was really a very special opportunity for us. And it's been a great partnership. They truly always want what's best for the brand, even though at the time it might create challenges for the business. And having the ability to do that and age products up like this to 8, 9, 10 years old, the commitment on our side and and on their side to do that is really what's gotten Woodinville to this point and really made it special.
How much fun have you had working with Bill Lumsden?
Oh man, never a dull moment. Bill has been, he's been instrumental. Obviously he's the sister company. But even in the early years, some of the advice when we were looking at, one of the first things we looked at is how do we grow? How do we grow thoughtfully and carefully? And Bill spent days out here with us, and we looked at options. Do we build a second distillery? Because we're pretty tight on our footprint here. And he said, look, well, and you and Orlin and Brett, he said, you guys have to produce here in Woodinville. There's 100 wineries that I can see them from here. The wild yeast strains that are affecting your mashes in just every element of your production. I'm afraid if you ever change that footprint, it could change the profile of what we all love so much. So that, and even to this day, we work on special projects together and collaborations that we hope to someday might actually come to fruition for the consumer commercially. So he's been a wealth of knowledge for us.
What's the best lesson Dave Pickerel taught you?
Oh, that's a long, long list. There were so many things. Like I mentioned to you before, like win your backyard before you try to win the world. That was a more business advice from Dave. And obviously he was a phenomenal mind in the chemical engineering, distillation, production side of things. But without that bit of advice, Mark, I really, don't know if we would be here or we'd be successful because, you look at a lot of other of our peers at the time that went with a different distribution model, and it just kind of fizzled out because there's never really rooted in a given market that you had a consumer base that was loyal to the brand that could, stand the test of time. So that's the way I look at it. Brett runs more of the production side of things. I'm sure he would have something a little more whiskey related. But one thing that he really prompted us, ironically, coming from makers and being the obviously iconic wheated bourbon of the world, are really, kind of what that whole mantra for them is, was the rye base. Like he saw rye coming before rye was a thing, 15, 20 years ago. And so, we're a high rye mash bill, love that higher rye spice in all of our products, and even our rye whiskey, which is 100% rye, were really inspirations we took from Dave.
By the way, Brian and Carol from Carnation, Washington were the first in line Friday morning. They narrowly beat out their daughter Alexis and her fiancé Parker, who drove over the Cascade Mountains from Ellensburg, Washington, with their yellow lab Waylon to camp out for the first bottles of the 8-year-old bourbon. You'll find my tasting notes for it in last week's episode. Thanks to Orlin Sorenson of Woodinville Whiskey for spending some time with us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Bourbon, a deliciously smooth single malt known for its coastal charm and Highland heritage, loved by whiskey lovers worldwide. Discover Bourbon's full lineup at malts.com. Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the new Bottled and Bond Rye from Pennsylvania's Dad's Hat Whiskey. This one is a 6-year-old rye whiskey, bottled, of course, at 50% ABV. The nose is very aromatic with touches of baking spices, brown sugar, and honey. The taste is thick and spicy with clove, cinnamon, and allspice notes balanced by brown sugar, honey, and dark chocolate. The finish is long and aromatic with lingering spices. This is a classic mouth-filling rye whiskey, and I'm scoring the Dad's Hat Bottled and Bond Rye a 93. Next up, the new Elijah Craig Toasted Rye from Heaven Hill. It's bottled at 47% ABV, and the nose has notes of toasted oak, caramel, a hint of allspice, honey, and tobacco leaf. The taste has notes of toasted caramel, baking spices, honey, tobacco leaf, and vanilla. The finish is long and spicy, and I'm scoring the Elijah Craig Toasted Rye a 91. Finally, let's look at an exclusive bottling from the Whiskey Exchange, the 31-year-old Red Spot 1991 single pot still Irish whiskey. This is the oldest Red Spot cask ever bottled, and they bottled it at cask strength, 57.6% ABV. The nose has touches of red apples, subtle spices, pear candies, and a hint of anise. The taste starts off with a honey sweetness followed by a burst of pot still spices with pear candies, honey, and anise in the background. The finish is long, bold, and spicy. I'm scoring the Red Spot 1991 from the Whiskey Exchange a 94. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,700 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com.
Every year, Dewar's, the official Scotch whiskey of the U.S. Open Championship, rolls out a special limited edition whiskey to celebrate that year's tournament. The 2024 championship wrapped up in June, but the 2024 Dewar's 19-year Pinehurst edition is available now, and you don't want to miss it. This year's 19-year whiskey is double-aged, then extra-matured in rye casks, offering a rich profile with notes of pear and heather honey. There's a hint of spice in there, too, along with a dusting of cinnamon and cocoa powder. It's a sensory delight for any true whiskey or golf fan. So trust me, my fellow aficionados, grab a bottle and enjoy a whiskey crafted with the same skill and precision that makes the U.S. Open legendary. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2024. Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 46% alcohol by volume. Imported by John Dewar & Sons, Coral Gables, Florida.
Let's open up the inbox and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey. After I posted the news about the defeat of Nebraska's proposed alcohol tax increase in the WhiskyCast community app, Rick at the Whiskey Zone posted this comment. Glad to see cooler heads prevailed, for now. I fear alcohol is back in the crosshairs of religious conservatives who want to demonize it the way their great-grandparents did last century. I spent some time this week taking the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy's new American Single Malt course, partly for fun and partly to prepare for my master class on American Single Malts in a couple of weeks at the Whiskey Show in London. I posted a comment about it in the app, and Pete at Whiskey Ranked chimed in with this comment. Sounds like fun, but are they already planning for an updated course once the TTB defines the category, with a winking emoji? Well, I would imagine they'll update it. At BunkIH tweeted this comment on X. You are the right person to have that certificate. Sounds like a great course. Have fun, Mark. And Vicente Arancon added this. Great. Hope to take that course sometime in the future. The course goes live tomorrow on the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy's website, and we've included a link for more details in the show notes for this episode at WhiskyCast.com. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free WhiskyCast community app and join the conversation. You'll find it in your app store. You can also find us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and the email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
Every Irish single-farm origin gives completely different flavours when it's malted, fermented, distilled and matured. That's why we're exploring Irish terroir. Imagine how many flavours we find working with over 100 of them. Waterford Whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. Distillers have had to get rid of waste products since the first stills were fired up hundreds of years ago. Now, University of Aberdeen researchers have been looking into the extraction of valuable chemical compounds from spent lees and pot ale, the stuff left over after the distilling process. The chemicals like lactic acid and other compounds can be used to make drugs and cosmetics, among other things. The researchers have been working with Ripcell, a startup company, on testing the process with waste supplied by 12 Chivas Brothers distilleries. Their next goal is to see whether the process can work on an industrial scale. The process could also help reduce greenhouse gas emissions from distilleries. If there's something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the Apple and Google App Stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever go out drinking with a peacock? Always the same. Few too many, tail feathers come out, drinks get knocked over, bartender's not happy, night's over before it started. All I'm saying is, don't be the peacock in your group.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
The 2024 release of Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is out now. Available at Dewars.com. Get it while you can and appreciate every double-aged rye cask finished dram. Please drink responsibly.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.